Okay, thank you. Thank you for being here today. I want to explore how Pentecostal spirituality, how this spirituality invites us to read the Eden narrative, not only historically, but devotionally and pneumatically. Before turning to the argument, thank you for joining. Let me briefly mention the background of this study. The Edenic idea explored in this paper, it first emerged in devotional reflection many years ago. I later published short devotional booklets on Eden in my native language, we call Zopao, Zomi language, in 2012, and revised it in 2017, and then in Burmese edition, 2018. I want to show the cover of those earlier devotional editions. The one is in Zomi language. We use English alphabets, and the one is in Burmese language. That devotional intuition, it was later developed as a doctoral seminar paper for the course of Old Testament theology, a course with Dr. Ma here. Thank you for joining Dr. Ma and Mrs. Dr. Julie. At Oral Roberts University, I think 2020 or 2021, developed academically, In the present paper, it represents a further reworking from the reviews and comments from professor and friends. Yes, it's a reworking of that earlier seminar paper. With that background in mind, let's turn to the hermeneutical question surrounding the Genesis garden narrative. Original Eden in Genesis. Let me begin with a simple, but let's say, enduring question. What exactly was Eden? Was it a myth? Was it a metaphor? Was it sacred geography? Or was it theological memory? Is it something more? It's an enduring question, of course. In contemporary scholarship, the Garden of Eden, it often becomes either a symbolic sacred space or an ancient Near Eastern cosmology reframed for Israel's theological purposes. Scholars we know like John Walton, such scholars, they have rightly reminded us Genesis must be read within its ancient context. That contribution is significant and also necessary. But the hermeneutical tension that remains. If Eden becomes purely symbolic, what happens to the fall then? If Eden becomes purely literal, what happens? Yes, what happens to its theological depth? This paper proposes what I call a bipolar Pentecostal hermeneutic, one that holds together historical reality and spiritual formation side by side. Eden, here I argue, it was an actual primeval garden, but it was also a sacred narrative that continues to form the believing community under the illumination of course, the Holy Spirit. And for Pentecostal theology, that matters deeply because the question of Eden, it is ultimately the question of presence. Where does God dwell? And how is that presence experienced now? Next slide. The problem. In recent decades, functional and the symbolic readings of Genesis 1, 2, 3, such kind of readings have gained traction. Walton, that we mentioned already, for example, He reads Eden as sacred temple imagery and as functional ordering rather than material ontology. His works has helped many to recover the temple motif and the ancient cosmological framework. However, here my concern is not that such readings are wrong, of course, but that they may unintentionally flatten the ontological distinction between the pre-fall and the post-fall world. The pre-fall world, according to the Genesis, it is not simply our world plus innocence. It is a different ontological condition, as per sinless state, Genesis presents a world declared, we know, very good, not merely functional, but morally and structurally whole. If we lose that ontological distinction, the fall risks becoming a narrative device rather than a catastrophic rupture. Therefore, here I propose a bipolar approach. By saying bipolar, I do not mean compromise. I mean layered ontology. Eden, it is both a historical event and a theological paradigm at the same time. It is literal and formative also. It is spatial and also spiritual. Spatial in its historical time and spiritual in its space-time. Pentecostal hermeneutics, with its commitment to plenary inspiration and spirit-guided appropriation, it allows us to affirm both dimensions without collapsing one into another, a kind of integration. Bipolar personal devotional reading. Genesis 2, it reads like a memory, not just a parable nor a symbolic expression. The text itself names rivers, certain places. It situates geography. It describes placement and boundaries. East, west, all the geographical boundary it maintains. It describes placement and boundary as said. I'm here not attempting, of course, to locate Eden on Google Map, but the narrator in Genesis, the narrator presents it as real space by referring to all those geographical mapping locations, boundaries. And sacred space in Scripture, it is never abstract. It is embodied instead. From Sinai to Zion, to Jerusalem, to Pentecost, God's dwelling is always historically situated. We can point a finger, it's there, historically situated, of course. Thus, to affirm Eden's historicity is not naive literalism. It is theological consistency. Sacred presence in biblical theology, it is grounded in real space before it becomes typological space. Theme 1, one of the most striking features of Genesis chapter 1, it is divine speech. God said, God blessed, and God saw that it was good. The word good, it punctuates creation 7 times. This is not mere evaluation, it is performative speech. God's language shapes reality. Creation emerges within a moral and linguistic structure established by divine utterance. Eden begins in what we might call a linguistic culture of goodness. Human beings awaken, yes, we are awakened to a world where the first voice we hear, as the first man and woman, the first voice they hear is just blessing and saying good. In Pentecostal theology, speech, it still matters, but the speech must be spirit initiated or inspired. Yes, for us, prophecy, it matters, and spirit inspired proclamation, it matters, including spirit initiated glossolalia, speaking in tongue. They all matter because they are spirit inspired, spirit initiated. If it begins with a divine speech shaping reality, Pentecost continues that pattern. The spirit-filled community. The community participates in redemptive speech, words that heal, words that restore, words that proclaim, and words that testify. Thus, Eden, it is not merely here geography. It is the origin of moral language that shapes the community and joins in human life to its highest potential. Actually, the theme one is a kind of integration of my former SPS paper on the language of good, God's language in the beginning, maybe almost 4 years ago. Theme 2, Sabbath completed world. Genesis 2, it tells us something remarkable here. Adam entered a world already complete. We did not wake up to chaos. Adam, he wake up to rest. The verb kala, to complete, it signals finality. Creation was finished. It was done, totally done, before human vocation began. And Adam's calling to walk and keep, it echoes priestly language instead. His labor was not survival-driven toil that we know today. It was rather sanctuary service, priestly vocation. The tragedy of Genesis 3, it is not simply here disobedience. It is the loss of that unburdened vocation. In this sense, Sabbath in Genesis, it is not merely rhythmic, it is ontology. Humanity begins from rest, not toward rest. That theological pattern, it continues into Hebrews chapter 4 and the promise of eschatological rest. Theme 3, identity, image, breadth, benefit. Genesis presents humanity as image, breadth, and responsibility. Adam, he is formed from dust, but animated by divine breath. This integrated anthropology, it is crucial for us. Humanity is not just an autonomous subject. Humanity is a relationally derived being, derived from God's life. Herman Bavinck, he insists that humanity does not merely bear God's image. Humanity is the image of God itself. The whole person reflects divine intention. And Pentecostal theology, with its emphasis on spirit, breath, and regeneration, we understand as Pentecostal, we understand redemption as re-breathing in. The Spirit restores what the fall fractured. Thus, Edenic identity, it is not erased from history. It becomes the pattern toward which redemption moves. Theme 4, test of faith. The tree in Genesis 2, it is often misunderstood, especially in my context. It's one of the most raised questions among not only the congregation, but in evangelism. Why God put the tree in the middle? That kind of question. It is not about information, actually. It is about trust. The serpent does not first attack morality. He attacks God's credibility. Did God really say? That's the question raised by the serpent. The crisis in Eden is rational, the crisis in Eden is relational crisis. Who will humanity trust and believe? Every subsequent fall narrative, it echoes Genesis chapter 3. But Genesis 3:15 here introduces something extraordinary, a promise embedded within the judgment itself, the seed of the woman. The seed of the woman will crush the serpent's head. Redemption begins in the very Eden, not in Exodus. That matters theologically. Grace appears immediately. So let's move to theme 5, God of second chance. Genesis 3 contains a curse, but it also contains covenantal redirection. Garments are provided. It's also another summarized section of one of my paper, God's Clothing in Eden, something like that, the title. Garments are provided, of course. A promise is spoken. Exile is paired with hope. The garden becomes the first chapter of redemptive history here. From Seth to Noah and to Abraham, the promise unfolds. Thus, Eden, it is not merely the story of loss. It is the beginning of hope. So then, let's turn to the theology of the garden, sacred space. Now we arrive at a broader biblical trajectory. Many scholars, they recognize Eden, as we said, as proto-temple. God walks in the garden. Adam serves and guards. If we trace the storyline, we can see here Eden toward tabernacle, to temple, and then to incarnation of the Son of God, and then indwelling of the Spirit, living among us in filling of the saints, Pentecost. And then again, New Jerusalem, eschaton. The biblical drama, it is the drama of divine dwelling. Leviticus says, I will dwell among them, his people. John says, the word became flesh and tabernacled among us, lived among us. The book of Acts also says the Spirit is poured out without reservation. Revelation says again, God will dwell with humanity all over again. Eden is the opening movement of that dwelling motif. Here, Pentecostal infilling as New Eden is a kind of link to Pentecostal theology. Here is my central claim. If Eden, it was an external sacred space, Pentecost internalizes sacred space. Eden itself is a geographical location, maybe outside, but Pentecost is inside garden. The Spirit does not relocate Eden geographically, the Spirit of Pentecost, but the Spirit reconstitutes Eden anthropologically under the new covenant. The believer becomes the temple. The Spirit becomes deposit arbon, guarantee of what is to come. Eden, once guarded by cherubims, is now an internal sanctuary deep down in our life. Pentecostal experience is therefore not eschatological escapism nor political activism. It is an eschatological foretaste instead. Pentecostal spirituality, it is not just about social cultural recovery, but about personal devotion that blesses its community in turn. The spirit-filled life, it is not a replacement for Eden, of course. It is prophetic participation in restored presence. And this has cultural implications too. Communities longing for a homeland, like the Zomi people, displaced communities, migrant congregations, culturally fractured society. Yes, they cannot recover Eden right now territorially, but they may experience Eden pneumatically inside of us, inside of our life. Paradise is not rediscovered by geography at the meantime. It is re-inhabited through the indwelling and infilling Spirit of God. So, what is Eden? It is historical, a real beginning. And then it is theological, a structured, sacred space. It is pneumatological, fulfilled internally, fulfilled by the Spirit, the indwelling Spirit, and infilling, empowering Spirit. And it is eschatological, pointing toward Revelation 22. Eden, it is not a lost myth. It is a theological memory instead. It is a pneumatic presence, and it is an eschatological promise. Paradise, it is not relocated somewhere on earth. It is re-inhabited through the Spirit until the day when God once again dwells fully with humanity. Thank you. I have here some reflective questions for our conversation to continue, because the presenter is going to be me alone, so we have time. So number one, first, we don't need to go according to the order. You can pick it up, and then we can add more. If you have something more questions, yeah, you can add it up. This is just a simple. Number one, how does Pentecostal spirituality, how does it reshape Eden debates? Secondly, can the Spirit indwelling experience, can this Spirit indwelling respond to cultural displacement for fractured community, displaced communities? Does internalizing Eden, does it risk dehistoricizing Genesis? Number four, how should we understand the tension between the Spirit's present internalization of Eden and the future eschatological Eden of Revelation 22? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.